that will be extraordinary. Even just taking a look at Chuppa across his accomplishments, he's a player with a rich history in VGC. Not only you talked about his senior accomplishments, but also looking at the Masters Division runs that he's been able to make. I mean, he's still looking for that win, but he's come so close so many years in a row. You can see the 2 finalists placements that he's had up there, but there's a myriad of other international championship runs that he's had in top 32s, and then also top 16s too for other regional championship titles.
Yeah, and of course, looking at his team, you know, he has utilized Palmot, which I think is one of the most interesting Pokemon in the format, of course, with that move, Revival Blessing. And he's using primarily brand new Pokemon from Generation 9. That's actually one of the things I wanted to call out between both of these players. Both teams only have 1 Pokemon, respectively, that is from the previous generations. And so, yeah, we've got a lot of brand new Pokemon here. Both players are actually using Meowscarada and Golden Go. Those are just 2 of the most consistent, strongest offensive options in the format. But we've got the Dondozo Tatsugiri. One of the biggest questions we had going into this tournament is Dondozo Tatsugiri going to win? People, of course, have a lot of counterplay to it, but Chuppa here is one of the players trying to really give it its first victory in Scarlet and Violet, and all the other Dondozo Tatsugiri players have been eliminated. It's up to Chuppa to see whether or not he can claim its first victory.
But even on the other side of things too, then, a lot of hopes are on Jiseok to try to break that duo down, looking at that Garganacl and a couple of other awesome choices that he has been able to put onto his team. But Jiseok as well, just in Sword and Shield alone, Korean national champion from a few years before that, and then also the Players' Cup runs that Jiseok has been able to do for 4 Players' Cups in a row. Really awesome to see his performance there, and also in some of the other online team circuits.
Yeah, I think one thing that's not represented by those accomplishments is Jiseok was just one of the best online players on like the regular ranked ladder in game in Sword and Shield. He was constantly finishing first place. Like, he was really lights out, and I was really hoping to see him play at the World Championships. I believe he was competing in Korea at the time, and so ended up not being able to make it to Worlds. But it's really exciting to see him, you know, flying out here all the way from South Korea and using this really interesting team featuring a lot of Pokemon that aren't that common, especially the Garganacl, Baxcalibur. He's got this offensive Life Orb Mimikyu as well. And we talked about Tauros a lot throughout the course of this tournament, but yeah, Jiseok, of course, representing it here in the finals.
Yeah, so many Tauros in this tournament, so many Pelipper, a lot of really unique choices as well. And even just looking at the Mimikyu, I think what's really interesting about both of these teams as you look at them together is the options that they have for speed control, or maybe lack thereof when you look at Jiseok's team, just not really having access to those same type of options. The Mimikyu does not have Trick Room on it, so that's not a viable way for Jiseok to bring the speed in his favor, but you do have access to those priority moves that can help out a lot, like Aqua Jet on Tauros, as well as a Sucker Punch on Meowscarada.
Yeah, I think really what I'm going to be looking at in this matchup is that Dondozo Tatsugiri combination. It is really strong on Chuppa's team, and Chuppa has that Chesto rest set as well. And so one way that Jiseok has approached playing this tournament is using this really bulky Garganacl with Poison Terra to kind of just slowly KO the opposing team, especially with Sulk here. Now, that could normally work against Dondozo, especially maybe the Leftovers variants, but because this is the Chesto Berry set with Rest, Dondozo can just keep eating up Sulkier damage and then heal all the way back up with Rest. And even if it doesn't have the Chesto Berry anymore, like, Rest in itself is just still so valuable. The other thing to call out in this matchup is that the Dondozo actually has Earthquake on it. A lot of Dondozos recently have actually dropped it, you know, for Terra Blast, for example. Flying Terra Dondozo was very prevalent throughout this tournament, and then you run like Wave Crash and Order Up and Protect. And so the Earthquake here actually means that you can hit the Garganacl even in Poison Terra for super effective damage. And I think that's been a really big deal because I think Jiseok's been able to take advantage of the fact that there aren't that many Pokemon that can hit Poison Terra Garganacl for super effective damage. So my main question in this matchup is, when does Chuppa actually get the Dondozo combination activated, and does Jiseok actually have an appropriate response with this team?
Yeah, I want to look at that as well, because even though Earthquake is an option on Chuppa's team, there's not too many partner Pokemon that you would want next to the Dondozo that would be able to withstand the Earthquake. The two main options here are obviously, if you've got the Tatsugiri, giving that Dondozo a commander boost, then it's invulnerable and will not take the damage that way. But then you have Meowscarada that would take maybe just a little bit from the Earthquake. It does have that grass typing to help that out, but then Golden Go is the only Pokemon on this team that has Protect. So that would be the only other option that Chuppa would be able to place next to that Dondozo if he wants to play with the Dondozo and Tatsugiri pieces separately, that would be able to make that work. everything else just doesn't look as good. Like, you'd want Palmot and Arcanine to stay alive for some of the physical attackers on Jiseok's team.
Yeah, one really interesting thing, by the way, is these two players actually faced against each other already throughout the course of the tournament. Chuppa actually won 2-0, and so there is a lot of context going into this matchup. We weren't able to actually see them play throughout that set, but both players are coming into this saying, okay, I already have experience fighting against you. Chuppa, of course, having the winning end of it, probably, had found a winning strategy, and likely Jiseok now has to think about how to adapt against what he previously went against. And so I think from Chuppa's end, like, Dondozo Tatsugiri is like the clear duo to play towards. Meowscarada and Golden Go are just really consistent. I think you can bring Palmot and Arcanine, but it'd be a little bit more situational. So I think the first four I mentioned are more likely to come out. And for Jiseok's end, I think, once again, the question is, how do you actually adequately deal with Dondozo? And it's tricky, honestly. I think part of it is, can you get the Terra out, right? Because if you get Dondozo to Terra, it's, I believe, the Dragon Terra type here. You can use Baxcalibur, for example, with those super effective attacks to attack the Dondozo. But I think one other kind of approach is you use the Tauros, intimidate the Dondozo a bunch, and of course you can Sulk here. But I don't think Sulk here is as easy to just utilize successfully in this matchup because it is the rest Dondozo set.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing too is that, Garganacl does have that wide guard available, so it might be able to stave off some of that spread damage, but you're still looking at having to take some pretty heavy hits, even if you're able to get Meowscarada in a position to even Flower Trick into that slot too. At what cost when you know that there's an Arcanine waiting in Chuppa's party as well. Our trainers are locking in their very first Pokemon for this game one of this best of three for the grand finals of the San Diego Regional Championships. And to kick things off, Jiseok is going to start with that Meowscarada next to that Golden Go, and we've got Chuppa with the Meowscarada and Dondozo.
Yeah, so Jiseok going with probably the most offensive duo on his team, right? Like, this combination just pressures with a lot of damage immediately, and I like the idea there where you can just start scaring away things a little bit. And of course, like you see here, Dondozo's considering the Terra, and that's a really important interaction because otherwise Meowscarada can just get that super effective crit Flower Trick onto you. And so, yeah, Chuppa kind of opting for that to make sure you don't just feint to Meowscarada on the opposing end immediately.
Yeah, well, that brings up, like, maybe what you were talking about before. If you can force the Dondozo into a position where it is going to terrestrialize immediately, then does Jiseok have options in the back to be able to deal with this Dragon Terra type that we are going to see it take on through this terrestrialization? You're also going to be able to deal better damage with the order up that we saw Chuppa select as well, but Meowscarada is actually just going for a Protect here to kick things off.
And the Protect here really to try to, not get KO'd or get brought down to a Focus Sash through U-turn, but Chuppa doesn't get caught off guard by that and actually U-turns into Golden Go. So really nice pivoting there, recognizing, hey, Meowscarada is not exactly the bulkiest Pokemon, and it is time for Tatsugiri. It is now on the field. Chuppa recognizes this duo is just so strong. Why don't I just start the game off with it immediately? And here we go.
Yeah, I mean, the U-turn is so smart as well because of Meowscarada's natural speed. It is able to get that U-turn up before that Tatsugiri hits the field. And so we'll have to see how that's going to play a role as well, as the order up is going to start boosting attacks too, except for the fact that we do have the Protect on the field. So Meowscarada is not going to be taking any damage, but Dondozo still gets the speed boost, which will be so important later on in the game. The Make It Rain, though, is still going to hurt. Look at how much damage it does to that Dondozo.
Yeah, one interesting thing to remember here is with Unaware on the Dondozo, the special attack drops from Golden Go actually essentially aren't relevant against Dondozo. So that's one of the cool things. You can actually take advantage of Unaware and keep utilizing that. But the Dondozo, of course, does have Earthquake, so you have to worry about that super effective damage. But I think Jiseok honestly might not be too upset about that turn one. You got a fair amount of damage off immediately. One other interesting thing is the Meowscarada does have knockoffs, so you can actually remove that Chesto Berry, making it so that if Dondozo uses Rest, it won't be able to just wake up immediately as well.
Yeah, I mean, you are going to look at the fact that Dondozo doesn't have Sleep Talk, so that's not even an option as well for if the Dondozo is asleep. It won't be able to get an attack off either. Meowscarada is going to leave the field here for Jiseok, though, so going to have a switch into the Tauros. So you do have that Intimidate drop, and also because it's an Aqua Breed, you're not going to be taking as much damage coming through from that Dondozo either if it does decide to go for something like a Wave Crash. But it's also just a full swap on the board as well, as Baxcalibur makes an appearance, revealing that fourth and final Pokemon for Jiseok in this first turn.
I really like the approach here, you know, like bring out Tauros for Intimidate. Look how little damage that did, right?
Very little.
This is so smart from Jiseok, basically getting a big chunk amount of damage immediately with that Make It Rain. And now you've already forced the Terra out from Dondozo, right? The Excalibur on this team is actually Water Terra. So you can Water Terra and basically not take any damage or very minuscule damage from pretty much all of the attacks. The other thing to consider here is that it is speed order up rather than attack order up. So the Dondozo isn't actually able to snowball very quickly in terms of damage output. So I think Jiseok, you know, Garganacl has been such a pivotal Pokemon on his team for the course of this tournament, but really good job to recognize, hey, it just doesn't make that much sense in a matchup where Dondozo has Rest and Chaspu Berry, and really, really smart here. We're going to see the Terra, and I think it makes so much sense to just Terra that Excalibur, make sure you don't faint from an order up. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, it does give that speed boost, but even with all of that damage from the Make It Rain, you know, Dondozo is really not in a position to be able to take a super effective attack from this Excalibur very easily. Tauros going to go for a Protect, though, so just to keep itself safe for this turn in case something else was going to be heading its way, but the order up is actually going to go into the Tauros here. So, you know, Chuppa trying to go for some of that damage, but despite that speed increase, this Icicle Spear is gonna hurt. Let's see how much it's able to do here.
Let's hit number 1, hit number 2,
Loaded
hit number
dice.
3. Hit number 4?
Yep.
Okay.
All right. So it is actually going to be able to survive. That's pretty critical here.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I think Rest really the only option you can go for here. Excalibur, of course, could go for a Ice Shard here, but I'm not sure that's actually enough to knock out, given the defense boost. From Jiseok's end, you could consider switching out the Tauros and then bringing it back in for Intimidate. I think this is actually one of the reasons why Tauros is picked up in usage going into this tournament. The main thing with Dondozo Tatsugiri is you're essentially stuck on the field once you combine forms, and so with Intimidate, you can actually get rid of those attack drops, essentially. And with so many players now moving towards speed rather than attack for order up, you're really able to take advantage of the fact that they just can't deal that much damage after a single Intimidator too. So there's the switch from Jiseok, and there's Ice Shard.
Oh, the survival there, so clutch. Dondozo able to use Rest, recover all of that HP, and because it was not affected by a knockoff earlier from this Meowscarada, you do have that Chesto Berry available to be consumed to get rid of that sleep condition. So right away, Dondozo back up and ready to go, and I think it's time to start firing off some of those Earthquakes before that Tauros starts to come back in.
Yeah,
just gotta get damage off.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, absolutely. You could consider switching Meowscarada back out into Tauros. Now, we already saw the Earthquake didn't do that much to Excalibur. What's tricky now is if you go for Rest again, you won't just wake up immediately, right? So Jiseok coming so close to actually getting that knockout with Ice Shard, it isn't quite enough, but there is the Meowscarada switch in, and yeah, Dondozo's attack now isn't looking as good.
No, I mean, you still have to do what you can, though. And at least you're stalling for enough time here that maybe PP comes into effect. I don't know. But order up, going back through into the Excalibur. That's such low damage now from the Intimidate drops that we've seen from this Tauros on the opposing side. And the Icicle Spear, it's gonna still be making those multiple hits with that loaded dice held item. And this is in cleanup range now, too.
Oh, there it is. Yeah, it gets 5 hits, brings it under half. I think one thing you can't help but wonder is if Jiseok just went for the same play last turn instead of going for that Ice Shard, you would have been able to chip away Dondozo a little bit more. But the main thing here is I'm not sure Dondozo gets the knockout on a Excalibur, right? That order up did okay damage, but it looks like it'll likely survive another one. So there is a decent chance Dondozo just faints after this turn. And so Jiseok found a really interesting approach to dealing with the Pokemon that I think gives his team a lot of trouble. Bait out the Terra, which was what we were talking about before the match started, and then use Excalibur accordingly. Great Intimidate cycling here from the Tauros as well. But the question is, you know, after Dondozo goes down, you know, Chuppa still has a lot of resources on his team, and so with those resources, can you, carry yourself over to a finish line? And yeah, Jiseok just kind of conserving this Intimidate back and forth, going to be valuable, especially for the Meowscarada, less in the back for Chuppa's end.
Yep, we see the Golden Go come back out on the field here. It's going to have to take an Earthquake, though, so that's a little rough on the income, but knowing that there were those Intimidate drops, Golden Go is able to hang on pretty easily here. And Excalibur with the loaded dice, it just needs those 5 hits to be able to make it through. 4 might even be enough here as well, and that will do it. So Dondozo getting knocked out, but you still have tons of other options here on the team.
Yeah, I think the main thing is that, Chuppa's team is still fairly speedy. Tatsugiri is now going to come back out. That Tatsugiri has access to, moves like Icy Wind for support. You can use Icy Wind to drop the opposing speed, or you can just go for, say, Draco Meteor immediately to try to finish off the slot. Both players have committed Terra at this point, so there isn't any potential for more defensive Terras. And yeah, I think one interesting thing I'm curious about is kind of the speed interaction between the Golden Goes in this matchup, but I have to say Chuppa has played like incredibly well with Golden Go throughout the course of this tournament, and so there's a lot of offense right now, but one of the downsides for Chuppa is that neither the Meowscarada nor the Tatsugiri have Protect, and of course Jiseok knows that. But the question is, do you really need Protect if you're able to just knock your opponent out before they're able to move?
Yeah, and that's definitely why I feel like you see Meowscarada as such a nice option to be able to bring in next to that Tatsugiri. You can go for some of that speed control if you want to select Icy Wind here, but also Meowscarada is just so naturally fast. And a lot of trainers right now are running it at max speed, max attack to be able to ensure knockouts, but also ensure that they move before some of the heavier hitters in this format.
Yeah, and exactly. Like, this is where late game Tatsugiri is actually kind of nice, because with that Choice Scarf, you do just kind of guarantee outspeeding the opposing side and actually pressure with damage. Like, don't discount a Draco Meteor from Tatsugiri, right? And so here is the knockoff coming out, and that is just going to get the knockout into Golden Go. And so, yeah, what's interesting here is that, like you mentioned, Chuppa just kind of has the speed advantage right now. The knockoff, at least, you know, you have to commit into a certain attack, and the Meowscarada on this team has a Choice Band, so at least you know now it's locked into that Choice Band, and it's Choice Scarf on Tatsugiri. So Jiseok this next turn knows exactly what can happen in terms of offense. Of course, either Pokemon can pivot out into Chuppa's final Pokemon, but Jiseok just going for Protector, scouting it out, and sacrificing Golden Go, saying, I'm probably not going to get another move off with Golden Go in this matchup, because it's just slower than everything. You can just knock me out so easily with your Meowscarada.
Yeah, well, Meowscarada is going to make another appearance, and I think that this is a really interesting position as well because of what Chuppa has in the back. Do you feel comfortable and confident enough that you might be able to bring it in? I was almost thinking maybe if we saw the Tauros again, that's just an ideal switch out for the Meowscarada to be able to get rid of that Intimidate drop. And also, you're able to reactivate Protean if Meowscarada does get a chance to switch out and come back in. So you could change your typing again that way. So kind of available on both sides if they really want to.
Yeah, this is honestly I think pretty tricky position for both players. I mean, Chuppa having the speed advantage certainly helps a little bit. You do have to worry about the focus sash on the opposing Meowscarada, but that Meowscarada does not have access to like a U-turn. Ice Shard is just going to come out. It's decent damage on a Meowscarada, but you know does not get the KO. And knockoff now will finish off Excalibur, so Jiseok will be down to his final two Pokemon. I think a big question here is where's Meowscarada targeting?
Meowscarada ends up targeting into the Golden Go. I think that's definitely going to be really good for Jiseok, and that is a one-hit knockout. Great targeting there. That is so rough for Chuppa to have switched that into a powerful knockoff coming in from that Meowscarada. Tatsugiri gets to come back in and also has the ability to change up what move it wants to go for. But this is it for both trainers, their final two Pokemon in this first game.
Yeah, that was a really nice play. I mean, you know, there's no potential Protect at that position, and like the Meowscarada, you could, I guess, Flower Trick it, but the knockoff, yeah, would cover for one, getting rid of the Choice Scarf on Tatsugiri, or two, you know, if you switch into the Golden Go, then you just get the knockout. So nicely done on Jiseok's end. I think Chuppa really going for the switch there, saying, well, I don't really want to be stuck with Draco Meteor. I kind of want to reset, maybe potentially, you know, go for like Icy Winds later on in the match. But yeah, now it's going to be the final two Pokemon from both ends. And the thing for Chuppa is that you do have choice items on both Pokemon. So the Tauros here going to get it Intimidate onto the Meowscarada. And very critically, the Meowscarada right now is locked into that knockoff.
Yep, I was thinking the same thing, that you would really in this position almost rather have the Flower Trick as an option just to be able to be that grass type, because with Tauros across the way, you do have to wonder, is a close combat maybe heading in my direction? And being a dark type is not where you want to be right there in front of that Pokemon.
Oh,
but
the Protect comes out! Chuppa had a gamble here, and I'm not sure it's going to pay off as Draco Meteor goes into the Protect, and this is absolutely huge for Jiseok right now.
Yeah, this is a huge turn for him as well. I mean, the knockoff, too, just going to get protected away. So this Tauros has free reign of whatever it wants to do here, and it's going to be close combat, targeting down Chuppa's Meowscarada. And so that's another KO here for Jiseok. It's just the Tatsugiri left. Doesn't feel like that's going to be enough.
Yeah, I like that play a lot. I think, you know, obviously Chuppa can consider doubling up onto the opposing side, but then the thing is you're stuck with -2 Tatsugiri, and the Meowscarada is stuck using knockoff, and the opposing Meowscarada might actually be able to, you know, just Flower Trick everything for a KO, but the read goes correctly there. Draco is going to go into Tauros. Okay, it does manage to get the knockout there, but I'm not sure it's really going to be enough. I think 2 Flower Tricks here certainly should finish up this game, and masterfully piloted by Jiseok, as knockoff here will remove that Choice Scarf as well, and so Meowscarada now will be able to guarantee moving first in this upcoming turn, and we're going to see Jiseok lead take this first game in the Grand Finals.
A masterful display there. I mean, Jiseok just had such a nice control of that end game, and being able to work around that Dondozo Tatsugiri was so well done, especially knowing that Jiseok had lost those 2 games in the very first set that they had played in this tournament. Having game 1 right now feels so good for him.
Yeah, so I think, you know, the question in this matchup was essentially how do you deal with the Dondozo Tatsugiri combination? And Jiseok had this really intricate game plan, right? It was like, okay, let me chip away at the Dondozo a little bit first with that Make It Rain, then Cycle Win Intimidate, and even baited out the rest, right? And the thing is that the Dondozo just, because order up is plus speed rather than attack in this matchup, you just don't actually do that much damage. And so, yeah, I'm actually really curious about how Chuppa, you know, adjusts here, right? Because I think it's finally shown, hey, Dondozo plus the Tatsugiri doesn't necessarily just sweep, and the Intimidates are a really major problem. So from Chuppa's end, I think you might want to try to ideally knock out the Tauros first, then get Dondozo and Tatsugiri activated next to each other. But that's easier said than done. Obviously, Jiseok will know, okay, it's really important for me to conserve the Tauros. And so, yeah, I think one of the things is, can Chuppa leverage just the threat of Dondozo and Tatsugiri, but not actually combine it until the Tauros has actually been eliminated?
Positioning for Dondozo and Tatsugiri is so difficult. I mean, we saw this even when we were commentating over your brother and just seeing how he was able to navigate through the Dondozo Tatsugiri. Like, where do you really position them on the board to actually get that combo to work? And in this matchup, even more so, does feel very precarious. But Jiseok didn't even bring the Garganackle. Like, the one thing that we were kind of looking at is, well, Dondozo was a great answer to that, but that's not really a threat if Jiseok is able to work around the positioning of that Dondozo Tatsugiri combo and then also just do enough damage.
I agree. I feel like Jiseok's really found a combo that works well here, and I would be kind of surprised if he deviated from the 4. I think like Garganackle, like, it still just isn't consistent enough against Dondozo, and it's maybe a little bit too slow-paced. I think it's really cool that Jiseok kind of just pushed the tempo with this team. We've seen him play very defensively with this team throughout the course of the tournament, but in this one, he has a very, very different game plan, specifically into this rest Dondozo. And so maybe swap some of the Pokemon. I don't know. I feel like Mimikyu just doesn't really offer very much in this matchup either, but I guess the one interesting application for it is if you know, bait out the Dragon Terror on Dondozo, but let's see if it's the same Pokemon coming out. It is going to be Meowscarada and Golden Go once again. And,
yep. And hey, well, would you look at that? It looks like we got some similar Pokemon on both sides here to kick off game 2 of this best of 3. Jiseok does have that game advantage, so he needs one more win here to crown himself the regional champion in San Diego. And this feels like such a toss-up. What do you do here, Aaron?
It's tricky, yeah. I think like one of the things is obviously both sides threaten each side with super effective damage, right? And so it's like, do you go for a Terra this early on just to make sure you survive an attack? For example, the knockoff from the opposing Meowscarada is looking really, really threatening. Chuppa does have that super effective U-turn, but Jiseok has the Focus Sash on Meowscarada, right? And so Meowscarada is more or less guaranteed an attack off if it wants to actually move, but Jiseok's saying, you know what, I'd actually rather conserve it right now, and bringing in Tauros to get that quick Intimidate off onto the opposing Meowscarada.
Yeah, that feels really good here as well. You know, the Intimidate is going to be very helpful for just utility, and then you also have access to some pretty awesome options there in terms of attacks. But it's time for a Terra too, so you're going to see one of those Golden Go receive that Terra Orb, Terastallizing to that Steel type, just to be able to help out some of that attack that could be coming out from a Make It Rain. But knockoff, going to change Meowscarada's typing to the Dark type. It does keep Jiseok's Golden Go quite safe here, but the Make It Rain coming through, double stab, doesn't have the choice specs anymore, but it still packs quite a punch.
Get some damage there. There's the special attack drop. Now the Make It Rain from the opposing side. Now, one of the interesting things we were talking about going into this is, can you actually eliminate Tauros? Because once you do, then Dondozo and Tatsugiri, you know, has a lot more value. So the thing is, though, that the Tauros is decently easy to switch into this position. And so, yeah, we see kind of a trade immediately here. And it's still, I'd say, a fairly neutral point. And, you know, by removing the opposing Golden Go's choice specs, like Golden Go now has the option to actually just click like that Shadow Ball, for example. And so one of the questions here is, do you think your Meowscarada can actually KO the Golden Go? If not, like, yeah, maybe you consider switching it out. The opposing Golden Go here is also, you know, has options, but I think Chuppa might be a little bit afraid of, you know, just fainting to a Shadow Ball, for example.
Yeah, absolutely. We are going to see a protect on the Golden Go from Chuppa's side just to make sure that it's not going to be taking anything super effective here. Masquerada goes for the knockoff. It does get the knockout here. So Jiseok's Golden Go is not going to be able to get a second attack off. But what is this Tauros going to do from Jiseok? That is a wave crash now coming through. Golden Go's not going to be affected by that.
Yeah, so this time around, like, Dondozo Tatsugiri hasn't hit the field and Jiseok is losing Pokemon, right? I think that's a really big deal. If you can actually pick up 2 knockouts as well, you prevent the Tauros from switching in and out, and that means Intimidate is just so much less valuable, right? You essentially just can really get 1 maybe. And so I think for Chuppa right now, you ideally want to just look towards picking up that second knockout as quickly as possible. That's easier said than done, though, of course. The Meowscarada right now is locked into that knockoff, so it's not in a very good position. You know, you can't get rid of either the Focus Sash or Meowscarada. The opposing Tauros has a safety goggle, so removing the item there isn't that valuable. And so I like the idea of considering like a protect here, pivot Meowscarada out, get some repositioning. But of course, if you switch the Meowscarada out, well, there's the Dondozo or Tatsugiri in the back. You risk one of those just coming in and getting knocked out by a double up. So yeah, not gonna go, and gonna go for the double, and it just fails.
Yeah, doesn't get it. I mean, Meowscarada is still gonna be able to use the knockoff into Jiseok's Meowscarada, so no more Focus Sash available, but it's a return knockoff here to eliminate Chuppa's Golden Go. So both Golden Go are off the board, and now you're really looking at seeing how Chuppa navigates around this position where he doesn't actually just have a choice left. That close combat coming in from Jiseok's Tauros going to finish up Meowscarada as well. So it's just down to Chuppa's final 2.
Yeah, you know, it never feels that great to go for like a double protect, especially that early on in a match. But I think Chuppa was basically saying, I really need to get Dondozo and Tatsugiri in safely. I don't really want to take any risks. If the Golden Go faints here, so be it. If it gets the double protect off, great. Then the next turn I can, you know, get the Dondozo Tatsugiri combo by switching out the Golden Go. And the main thing there is, of course, Chuppa could switch either Pokemon out, but the problem is the team is so reliant on getting Dondozo Tatsugiri activated. If you switch one of those in, of course, Jiseok could predict that and just get the knockout. So Dondozo plus Tatsugiri is activated, but the Tauros is still around, right? And so Tauros, of course, can pivot out, come back in, get that Intimidate. But this time around, Chuppa at least has knocked out a couple more Pokemon, has done more damage just across the board in general. And if you're able to get the Baxcalibur as it switches in with this order up, you probably just win the game. And so, yeah, it's actually a really interesting pin. You switch out the Tauros here.
I think you have to switch out the Tauros. I mean, at this point as well, you are going to be taking some damage from the Meowscarada if that's going to be the Pokemon that attacks.
Switching out.
But, yep, that is going to be Baxcalibur switching into that Meowscarada's place. It's just going to be a manual switch here. And the Terastallization as well. This is going to help just a bit to be able to keep the Dondozo just a touch safer. But that sure doesn't feel good. You hope that you're going to get enough damage down.
Yeah, I mean, it's a huge, huge turn, right? Like, Chuppa ended up going for order up into the Tauros slot.
And
the protect from Tauros, masterfully done there, as now the order up is going to go into the protect. Yeah, you get the speed boost, but Baxcalibur hits the field. It is safe. And now, of course, it can go for, you know, super effective attacks, right? And so, yeah, that was really, really well positioned. However, the main thing to consider is that the Steel Golden Go was already committed earlier on, so you don't actually have the Terra here. So, of course, you could go for order up into the Baxcalibur slot. Now, if you're Jiseok, you could consider protecting Baxcalibur, switch Tauros out, and then bring it back in for Intimidate. So there's that switch. But one of the big questions I have here is, does Jiseok take a gamble and just go for an attack with the Baxcalibur?
If he goes for the attack, that is the biggest read of this entire tournament, but he is going to play it safe here, goes for the protect onto the Baxcalibur, and so the order up will hit its mark into the Meowscarada on Jiseok's side instead. So you do get that speed boost, and you get a pretty good knockout too. So it eliminates the ability now for Jiseok to pivot in and out that Tauros Intimidate. This is going to be the one that sticks.
Yep, exactly. And so Dondozo will be at +1 attack, and without the ability to actually Terra that Baxcalibur, Dondozo might just actually have enough resources to pull this one out. We'll see how much order up does at +1. Whether or not that's enough to get the one-hit knockout. The thing is, even if you don't get the one-hit knockout, it might be okay, right? Because you have the rest combination, and so even if you take like 80% of your health, well, you can just heal all the way back up. So I'm wondering now, maybe a critical hit, especially from the Baxcalibur, is what I think could greatly change things. The other thing to consider is, even if the Dondozo faints, there's still the Tatsugiri in the back, and the Tatsugiri can Draco Meteor as well. And so I think Chuppa handling this game much better than the previous one, and yeah, let's see if Dondozo can pull it off here.
Yeah, I mean, he was able to withstand that first part of the game well enough to be able to get Dondozo Tatsugiri next to each other with that knockout onto the Golden Go. So the order up now coming out from the Dondozo. It will be able to land into the Baxcalibur, and it is just going to be a knockout here. It's all up to the Tauros on Jiseok's side to see if he's able to close out this second game. But the speed boost coming through, the close combat into the Dondozo, just absolutely not enough. And the defense drop as well, going to be detrimental.
Yeah, and so this was night and day from the last game, right? Like this time around, instead of committing to Dondozo super early on, Chuppa was able to bait out the Terra from Jiseok, which is such a big deal. You got the Steel Terra out from the Golden Go, making it so much harder for the Baxcalibur to actually survive this endgame. The Baxcalibur is a really cool counter if you're able to actually get the Water Terra onto it, but without the Terra, it just feels so much worse in this matchup.
Yeah, that was a clean knockout for sure, even with that Intimidate drop onto the Dondozo to just make the Commander boost a little bit more comfortable. What an incredible set we've had so far, though. We are going to a Game 3 in this best of 3, so the winner of this next game will be crowned your San Diego Regional Champion.
It all comes down to this.
It really does all come down to this.
I think going into this next game, the main thing I'm looking for is how do you accordingly deal with the Meowscarada plus the Golden Go lead. That felt really effective in the last game, and so for Jiseok, there are a couple of adjustments you can make. The first is maybe don't commit your Terra on Golden Go so early. Part of the reason for the Terra is to get rid of the Ghost typing on Golden Go. By getting rid of that Ghost typing, you no longer feint to a super effective knockoff from the Meowscarada. And so one thing I'm curious about is, could you ever consider leading, for example, the Tauros to get the immediate Intimidate off onto the Meowscarada? I wonder if you ever consider leading the Baxcalibur as well. It feels a little bit risky, but if you do, then you can at least like pressure Ice School Spear immediately into the Meowscarada slot or even just the Ice Shard. But basically, to me, I think Jiseok needs to find a different way to play around the Golden Go Meowscarada lead. I mean, Chuppa could deviate and not lead that again, but it's felt really effective and he made it look really strong in the previous one. And I think from Jiseok, the main lesson that you can learn from that last game is, wow, like late game Dondozo is just absolutely so strong into me, even if I conserve Intimidate, if I do not have the Terra on the Baxcalibur. And so I think he's got to be a little bit more careful about the Terra throughout the course of this game. And it felt like he was forced to Terra Golden Go in game 2 and turn 1 of the previous game. And so this time around, you might have to make some adjustments so that you don't feel forced to do that just to respond.
Maybe you take a coin flip as well if you're looking at these leads once again, because it is Meowscarada and Golden Go for both of our trainers in this game 3. This first turn is so important. Looking at how Chuppa is going to try to navigate this position, whether or not Jiseok is going to end up incorporating that terrestrialization onto the Golden Go. There's so many different ways that this first turn could go.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's just this threat of the knockoff that's so scary, right? And the Meowscarada is actually like relatively safe because the opposing Meowscarada does not have something like a super effective U-turn. The opposing Meowscarada only has Grass and Dark type attacks, so from Chuppa's perspective, it's really safe to just launch that knockoff into the Golden Go slot and saying, okay, well, even if you don't Terra, that's fine. I get rid of the Choice Specs, which is a pretty big deal. So you called it, turn 1 really important here. And let's see, we're starting it off with the Terra immediately, and it's the Golden Go going for the Terra once again.
All right, well, this ended up not quite paying off in that game number 2 the way that you might have hoped to see it. But the Meowscarada going for the knockoff here. We got to see the Protean go through first, but it's still able to do so much damage to that Golden Go. But Meowscarada able to knock off in return, calls it. Chuppa was going for an attack with that Golden Go, but now it doesn't get a chance to move.
Wait a minute, that might have been really greedy. Make it ring now. Steel boosted single target onto Meowscarada, and that's gonna get the knockout. That's a double knockout to start this game. And now with Dondozo and Tatsugiri in the back, the Tauros can just cycle in for Intimidate and out, and in for Intimidate and out. And it's a complete disaster there as Chuppa plays really aggressively with the Golden Go, and yeah, the knockoff just KOs it.
I mean, this is the adjustment that Jiseok really needed to make in this game number 3. Seeing the exact same leads, you just didn't want to have that problem of losing a Pokemon so early. So we will see Dondozo and Tatsugiri hit the field here for Chuppa as his final 2 Pokemon, and it is going to be on this Dondozo to try to clean up this game, or at least get Chuppa into a position where that Tatsugiri might be able to take over after the Dondozo gets knocked out. He's got to do something here, and it looks like he's just going to go ahead and Terra and try to get these Earthquakes down.
Yeah, but you know, this time around, like, Meowscarada's out on the field and it's healthy, right? So you can bring in the Tauros, get the Intimidate off, and you know what can happen this time? You can finally use the knockoff to get rid of that Chesto Berry. And so without the Chesto Berry now, well, as soon as you take all this damage, you rest, but then you just have to actually take sleep turns. And so, yeah, that turbo was just so explosive from Jiseok's end, and it would be a completely different game, I think, if Golden Go just opted for the Protect there, but Chuppa trying to play really aggressively and gets punished really heavily. He has a huge uphill battle up in front of him. But if there's any duel that can do it in this format with a comeback, it is this combination, but it's actually just going to be a flower trick here.
Well, so, you know, the Terastallization there for this Dondozo was quite smart, just going to remove that super effective damage there from that flower trick, and the Earthquake comes through. It is going to do just a little bit of damage here to that Meowscarada and Tauros, but you're still looking at such an upward climb. Going to try to go for a single target attack into the Meowscarada now, but this is the cycle that you were expecting, Aaron. The Tauros goes out, the Golden Go comes in, and I don't think Jiseok is feeling too bad about this, especially when he goes for a Protect on the Meowscarada here.
Yeah, one thing that's actually pretty interesting here is that you saw previously the Dondozo was actually slower than the Meowscarada, and that's one of the things even with speedy Dondozo, like that's why people are running this kind of order upset. And so with that, now you're actually able to outspeed, which is a pretty big deal. We saw the flower trick. I think Jiseok was saying, okay, well, if you don't Terra here, actually just win the game with this flower trick, so I'm willing to go for it, right? But as a result, the Chesto Berry actually is still there on the Dondozo, and the speed boost came up now. So I think the last two turns playing correctly, that's how Chuppa kind of wants things to go out. Here's the Earthquake, so we're going to see the first knockout as Golden Go is going to faint.
Yep, Golden Go should get knocked out here. Meowscarada is still going to hang on, but you can see that speed boost really paying off in dividends here. That Golden Go now is one more less Pokemon that Jiseok has to be able to roll through here to cycle in those Intimidates, but the knockoff coming through to knock off that Chesto Berry puts Chuppa into a worse position.
Okay, Baxcalibur has hit the field. Now, of course, you could just pivot out the Meowscarada, go out into Tauros, bring the Dondozo essentially down to neutral, and I think you could play it safe here, right? Protect the Baxcalibur, for example, and cycle in a third Intimidate later on to continuously decrease Dondozo's attack. Make sure that you just don't feint to an order up at all, because I think right now the key win condition essentially is, for Chuppa, can I just eliminate Baxcalibur before it gets an Icicle Spear off? So there's the switch.
Yep. Tauros now gonna get an Intimidate drop, and at this point too, at least for Chuppa, you know that there's no Terra available on Jiseok's side, so you're not going to see that Baxcalibur this time around. You did see the Golden Go use it before, so the order up might be really impactful here. It's going to be enough with that.
No!
Look at those Intimidate drops being so important here for Jiseok, and now the Glaive Rush coming through to the Dondozo. It's still going to be able to hang on, but just barely. Can't go for the rest here either.
Yeah.
You won't wake up.
You can rest, but then you're just stuck to sleep. So there's Ice Shard here. And we saw how much it did previously. Dondozo is now eliminated. Tatsugiri will come back out on the field, but it is vulnerable. Jiseok Lee has 3 Pokemon still, and a masterful game here. As close combat is going to go into poor Tatsugiri. It'll survive for another turn, but Jiseok must be able to taste the championship at this point. He is 1 turn away from winning the San Diego Regional Championships.
I mean, an Ice Shard here would do it, coming out for the Baxcalibur, so that priority move going into the Tatsugiri, and that final knockout crowns Jiseok Lee your 2023 San Diego Regional Champion.
I just love how calm Jiseok looks. I'm sure as soon as that turn 1 happened, he probably could taste the victory, right? He's like, I have so many resources to work with, and so, yeah, I think Chuppa just getting a little bit greedy, as maybe especially off how like the previous games had gone, and gets punished really heavily this time around. And yeah, Golden Go Meowscarada against Golden Go Meowscarada. There's so much pressure from both sides, but the Golden Go just getting eliminated immediately this time around means that, yeah, even with the Steel Terra from Jiseok's end, he's in a much better spot, and it's really hard for Dondozo Tatsugiri to come back from that position given the Intimidate cycling from Tauros.
Yeah, I mean, huge credits though to Chuppa. I know that he's falling short, but he's got another finalist